Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen? We've got the final thing to do for the sake of this Let's Play. And because of this though, this is gonna be the post-commentary for the majority of the final few videos of Super Mario Party. Because of this though, do you remember yesterday that we did manage to finish up with the forms of Challenge Road, and also we managed to able to obtain the 5th and the final gem in Super Mario Party, which is essentially the Gem of Passion. And now we're going to be able to actually hit back into Challenge Road for the final time. And this time around though, after when you beat the normal run, you actually get yourselves your Master Challenges. So even then though, once again though, about 80 of those mini-games to go through again. But this time around though with a much more difficult condition. So even then though, all the actual mini-games plays out exactly the same. But this time around though with some sort of a different objectives that we're able to actually deal with. And at the same time, normally in most other mini-games we're able to switch around a bit until whenever we get to the team-based mini-games and all that stuff. Well, usually kind of think about it, then yeah, you probably get the idea. So let's get to it, shall we, with the forms of precision and gardening, I should say. Now, this actually did manage to took us about 1 attempt, which is actually pretty good considering, because even then, all you need to do is basically you have to, like, wave the actual Joy-Con up and down, and that's all you really have to do for this part. Yeah, for the majority of the time, for the sake of the actual post-commentary of all that stuff, not only because of how the fact that it gives us the opportunity that we can able to jump into, like, several mini-games that actually contains harder challenges as far as you might think about it, but also since this is actually calls it the Master Challenge Road, it's very, very hard. Like, by all means by that is the fact that you see why whenever we get to in certain mini-games and all that stuff like Slapperanza, which actually kind of think about it did took us about 1 attempt, because even then though, for the most part though, the actual minigame itself is not that bad, and it's actually pretty easy if you're able to actually get the pattern down, even because of how the fact that in this one you need to earn about like 15 points, so, but even then we'll point things out with the actual failure attempts on that specific minigame. But honestly, I don't think we can able to show off the majority of the failure attempts on some of these minigames, because we just have to, like, hey, say something specifically. Although, let us know in the comments below if you want to see us manage to able to post up the actual failure attempts on certain minigames. So even then though, I just want to classify for telling you guys about this, because there's not much else you can really say about the forms of, you know, Challenge Road, as in a Master Mode. So even then, it's basically, it's like the, you know, the second difficulty on, during the likes of the actual part right there. And also, if you manage to completely done with the actual Master, difficulty with all these, challenges in one hand, as you can see, the actual spaces are now turned into yellow, because even then, though, if you manage to able to complete the actual normal Challenge Road mode, you get yourselves the actual blue space, and especially noticeable with a blue crown, which meaning that you actually done the actual Challenge Road normally. But if you manage to able to accomplish all of the actual Master Challenge Road, basically you get yourselves a yellow crown instead. Which even then though, we might actually aim for that though, because unlike in new forms of how it does it on the hard mode course in you know, in River Survival modes, that we couldn't afford to able to actually go for all of them. But even then though, I think it's about time to able to do them all in Challenge Mode. So even then though, in this one, as you can see right there, in Strike It Rich, thankfully though, it did took us about 1 attempt. So even then though, because of this though, you have to aim for about 55 points. And then if you've done so already, then, you know, you can essentially just complete that. So, and then if you, every time you complete one of the, Master Challenge Rooms, or the Master Challenge Road, you actually get yourselves 200 points instead of 100. So even then though, that, because of how the fact that where the actual difficulty starts to kick things in, so even then though, you probably get the actual idea for that part. So the next minigame here is of course, Dash and Dine. Now this one also took about, 1 attempt to able to actually just to complete this minigame though, because, well, it's not so bad considering, but the only thing that makes it a little bit tricky and difficult though is of course the actual toads, even with computer players included, they manage to able to decide to get in our way sometimes, which even then though, if you manage to get your accuracy going, with all this you know, trying to able to obtain most of the food, like either tomatoes or lettuce or you name the rest, then you weren't able to actually accomplish this minigame no matter what, even though you, I believe the ultimate goal in this one though is the fact that you need to earn about 5 points, so yeah, which is 1 above compared to the forms of how it does it on the normal mode. So even then though, that's as far as the actual major differences here. But then again, it doesn't matter if you tie or lose to this minigame though, because even then though, you have to really aiming for that specific amount of points in order to actually continue your progressioning with all this challenge roads and all that stuff. So yeah, that's as far as we can able to think about this for the time being. So even then, next up we have is Social Climbers, and basically in this one, we need to go for about 20 seconds to get up. So, and thankfully though, it only took us about 1 attempt on that minigame though, because even then though, sometimes the only thing that throws me off a little bit is the fact that sometimes we actually did manage to able to do a short distance between the actual climbing up to the pole. But if we manage to make it there for about a split second to react, then, you know, you probably get the idea you can able to actually reach it there in no time. But yeah, but then again, you don't have to worry about the actual, like, losing too many extra lives on this throughout, because unlike in the top 100, that, it does utilize the actual extra life system, so even then, no, that's as far as I can say about it. Alright, so next up is Sort of Fun, where basically in this one we need to earn about, you know, we need to aim, rather, 10 points, which thankfully it did took us about 1 attempt, because even then though, that, we already done this ever since during the likes of in River Survival mode, basically, so even then though, we just want to able to point things out for that specific discussion, so even then though, and also you need to be extremely fast and extremely accurate with the forms of some of these movements and stuff, even though sometimes the actual different sporting balls were able to actually pull out a little bit more randomly than in forms of how it does it from, if you remember, from the previous attempts or something. So even then though, yeah, basically you have to earn aim, sorry, for, you know, for 10 points, and that's all you really have to do for this part. So even then though, let us move on to Baton Anon, which basically in this one we need to aim about 110 points. So yeah, that's as far as we can able to pass it through. So, and much like the other mini games we actually did manage to done so far in this particular Shell Street, this is also a first attempt, because even then though, well, for first attempt as a completion, so even then though, because, well, honestly I feel like the timing aspect on this minigame is actually pretty dang good, even because of the fact that you need to keep your rhythm thing going, because obviously this is the rhythm-based minigame, quote-unquote, so even then though, you probably get the idea of how this is going, so even then though, I will admit though right away is the fact that this minigame might tend to drag on a little bit, even if only because of how the fact that, well, the actual countdown does manage to able to actually make this a little bit of some sort of a long length to able to actually go through, so even then though, that's besides the point. So obviously today's day is the forms of the 21st of July, in this case in 2019, so naturally speaking that, you know, we've already got about like 11 days to go until the next month arises, which is now, you know, August, so even then that when that time usually comes, then surely we can able to actually just, you know, get this Let's Play finished, and during the legs of the next weekend, in this case the final weekend of, you know, Super Mario Party Let's Play, even not to mention, the final weekend of this month, which is on July, so yeah, that's as far as I can go for that part. Alright, so this is where the difficult starts to come things in, and the reason why we did manage to jump cut some of this stuff, because here we go onto the forms of the first difficult minigame in Master Challenge Mode, and this is the reason why we cut out the failure attempts, because this minigame right here did actually took us about 4 attempts. Like, we did failed about 3 times, and then the 4th and final time, well, we did manage to complete it in the 4th attempt. Because what makes this a little bit tricky and difficult this time around, though, is the fact that, as you can tell, we're actually on a team of 3. And the only catch is about this is the fact that you have to able to cooperatively team up together to be able to actually gather tons of dust onto that specific ground. But if you manage to able to concentrate on something else, even if you want to let the team of 1 do it for you, well, you're probably gonna get yourself screwed over. So yeah, we did manage to able to fail 3 times on Dust Buddies, because I will admit though right away though, the team of 3 does have a lot of disadvantages, I will say, for this matter, because even then, well, it's all detached onto that specific vacuum cleaner. So even then, I just want to classify that. And plus, I think the team of one does have a best advantage, as far as I can usually say about that point. But even then, that's as far as off topic for this point. Alright, so the next minigame here is the fact that, for kicks, basically we need to simply just beat the actual team rival again. And thankfully though, unlike in Dust Buddies, well, basically this is actually the first attempt for victory. Because even then though, that's, well, the best advice for you though is the fact that not only do you able to actually just try to able to, like, gain, like, I don't know how you would call it, but keep on scoring. But also the fact of the matter is, though, is that I highly recommend you able to distract several teammates from the other team. Because if you manage to do so already, then you would able to actually guarantee yourself, you would able to actually claim your victory no matter what. So, but once again, though, we're slightly more vague when it comes to, like, the actual controls in this minigame again. Although, kind of think about it, this will be the definition of the final time we're going to be seeing those minigames in this Let's Play, because even then though, since, you know, we're going to be focusing on the last, point of, you know, in Super Mario Party, which is, of course, the Master Challenge Road, and, basically we can able to, you know, just accomplish all these stuff. So even then though, almost to the last level, or the last minigame in, you know, Shell Street. And this one is track harder, and the reason why we had to do another jump cut right there, just for the sake of skipping those, failure attempts. And speaking of such, for the attempts on that minigame, it did took us about 3 attempts. Like, we did fail, 2 times, if only because of the actual, Joy-Con, the one we're using right now. I'm really not recommending the actual left Joy-Con on that minigame, because the actual analog stick will really get in your way. So I highly recommend you the actual right Joy-Con, because if you use that right Joy-Con, then you would able to actually make this a little bit more easier for you. So even then though, and also if you couldn't see on screen, if you couldn't tell, we're actually going to be playing the selections of Bowser's minions. So even then though, like for instance in this first world, that we actually managed to play as Koopa Troopa. And the second world we're going to be heading to right now is Chestnut Forest. And basically we managed to able to play as Pom Pom. So even then though, yeah, that's as far as we can say about it. Alright, so now here we go on to the forms of nut cases. And conveniently enough though, another set of jump cuts with the forms of failure attempts. Because of this though, we need to aim for about 20 points in order to actually progress. Well, if you manage to complete that challenge. Now this minigame did actually took us about 5 attempts, because the 4 attempts we're actually doing these pretty badly. I think it's most notably because the game really recommends you able to use the HD rumble functionality. Because of this though, for the love of God, we always off by 1 nut by going through 20 of those nuts, which even believe it or not, that I don't know if we can able to actually like show this as a failure attempts run, but even then we'll those exponentially, but even then we'll classify for saying for that much. So even then though, that's as far as we can able to go for that specific you know, nut cases and all that stuff. So anyway, so now let's move on to Rhythm and Brews right there. And basically this one is the fact that we need to aim for 45 points. And good thing as well that this is actually the first attempt. So even then though, that since we're actually doing pretty slow if you ask me for that specific you know, rhythm minigames as a result. There's only one exception, which is of course, you know, clearing the table, because I found clearing the table minigame is pretty strict when it comes to timing aspect, but even then though, that's as far as I can usually say about it. Yeah, I was thinking about that too, because even then though, sometimes though, that the actual inputs might actually go not nearly as perfect as we hoped, but even then though, that's, you know, if you manage to get the timing going, it should be fine for the most part. So even then though, once you aim for about 45 points, then you can able to continue. So even then, let's move on now to Juice Box. And I believe we are teaming up with Princess Peach of all things. And of course, another jump cut right there because of the failure attempt. And luckily though, it did took us about 2 attempts. Because even then, the first attempt we actually did done, for the sake of the Juice Box minigame, is the fact that, wow, our teammate really screwed up on the first attempt. Yeah, because for whatever reason, Princess Peach doesn't do anything at all. And basically, because of this though, the objective in this minigame is the fact that you need to win every single round without any single losers. So, yeah, you need to be perfect on that one though, because if you screw up at least once, well, you have to do the entire minigame or that challenge again. So even then, I just want to classify that right about now, just for the sake of the forms of that specific jump cuts in mind. So, anyway, so let's move on to Fireplace Race, and basically in this one, we need to able to actually finish this within 20 seconds, and thankfully though, one attempt as a victory, successful attempt, because even then though, because if you manage to recognize the actual candle placements very well, then you would be fine for the most part though, and especially noticeable with the actual teammates itself, who are actually doing really damn good on that specific cooperative minigames, because even then, they're doing so well in that particular part, which I'm gonna say, I'm very impressed about those specific stuff. But it wasn't until the next couple of minigames up ahead, which is specifically senseless circumstance, which, you know, with the ones with counting up any single total or anything like that. For the love of God, out of all the minigames we are about to be doing for the sake of this particular part on the Master Challenge Road, holy crap, this will take us 9 attempts on this particular minigame, because in order to do this, is that you need to get the exact count. And similar issue to ones we have with the forms of roll call from Mario Party 2, I pretty much suck at the forms of memorization, those kinds of things like this, but if you manage to count those up in the exact counts, then you would able to complete it. But as for the other attempts though, well, we did fail about 8 times. Jesus Christ. I can't even believe that minigame is really difficult at times. But if you're trying to able to get a little bit more accurate with all these numbers and stuff, then you would able to actually accomplish that. But even then though, for the 9th attempt on the during the likes of that specific successful attempt, then you should able to deal with it okay. But it's just that the actual moving toes is actually a lot harder as you would think. There is another jump cut, because even then though, we're now moving on to lightning round, and thankfully though, it only took us about 2 attempts, because even then though, the first attempt we actually did done, we off by 3 coins, and as you can see, we are about to be collecting 20 coins without getting a single hit, because if you get hit, well, you know, just like in the likes of how it does it on a normal challenge, well, basically you have to re-grab these coins again, so even then I just want to classify that. Alright, so the next one we have is the forms of It's a Pit, and basically in this one is the fact that we need to stay until the very end. So, yeah, we don't need to worry about the forms of like getting a tie or anything like that. It's just that you need to go through, you need to survive on this particular minigame until the very end. So, and sometimes occasionally though, as you can see, we don't have any single teammates with us, so it's just all on our own. Yeah, which is a little bit more of a different thing in theory, if only the fact of the matter is though, until the likes of the next couple of minigames up ahead, then sometimes though it gets a little bit more tricky and difficult until at the very end. But we'll explain more into that until whenever we get to the point until the final weekend in during the likes of not only for the sake of this Let's Play, but also during the likes of in July as well. Yeah, that right there always throws me off though, because if you remember from our you know, the Party Board playthrough on, you know, in Super Mario Party, you can tell. Basically, though, we keep on getting screwed over with that specific pattern, as you can see, for that little, I would say this is definitely more like a harder version of that specific, you know, that roulette thing that we've actually on about. But even then, no, that's besides the point. Anyways, the next minigame here is Popping Spray, and another jump cut for that specific footage, if you couldn't tell. Because of this though, this one also gives us 2 attempts, much like the forms of how it does it on Juice Box and Lightning Round. But except this time around though, computer players, or even myself included, we're actually playing like an idiot on that minigame on that first attempt. Luckily though, for the second attempt though, it makes it a little bit more better than the forms of how it does it from, you know, the previous attempts. So even then though, that's as far as I can usually think about this for the time. So, but then again, much like the forms of how it does it on, the first time around though, is the fact that obviously we need to aim about all of the points, but the major difference is now is the fact that we're actually on a team of 3 as opposed to the team of 1, so even then you probably get the idea for that. Luckily though, with the forms of, well, I would say by the forms of this minigame, as you can see, absent-minded, thankfully though, it managed to take us about 1 attempt, and it's a good thing too, because in this one we need to aim for 13 points, and if you manage to aim for 13 points in exact, then you were able to accomplish that. But I think out of all the actual question trivia minigames like these ones, this one is actually probably the easiest, because, well, if you manage to able to get a little bit more of a clear look of that specific imagery and stuff, even with, the pixel art, or especially noticeable with the actual transparent image, then you should able to recognize who is missing on that specific photo question. So even then though, honestly, this is probably one of the easiest of the 3 minigames with, these particular environments minigames like this from the likes of, Stake Your Claim or, Absent-Minded, and especially noticeable with Juice Box. Well, usually I found Juice Box is also easy, but the one that's the hardest of the bunch, it was actually Stake Your Claim, which, we'll get to that during the likes of it next Saturday. So even then though, that's, we'll explain more on that until whenever we get to the failure attempts on that specific session. So even then though, that's as far as I can go for that part. So next up we have is Dropshots, which thankfully though, we have ourselves a, the first attempt for, successful attempts, because this time, we can now instantly master KO every single opponent. Hoo-ha! Yeah, so that makes it a hell of a lot more easier than your first time run through this. Well, at least for the most part on the normal run. So even then, all you need to do in this minigame is that, obviously, we need to beat the rival team, and that's pretty simple, self-explanatory if you say so. And of course, the final round, or the final minigame in this particular Chestnut Forest will always have to be Snack Attack, which, of all the actual recording attempts on that specific Snack Attack minigame though, I think it actually took us about like 4 attempts, because, well, the other 3 attempts are okay, but we accidentally failed, if only because of how the fact that with, obviously we need to aim for, like, a lot of those, popcorns and all that stuff, which is simple enough. But what makes this a little bit difficult compared to the forms of, Coney Island from Mario Party 5 / the Top 100 is the fact that the actual meteorite is about to be able to actually crash down, and if you somehow manage to get crushed into that, you will lose half of your, popcorn's portion, which you really need to avoid those, because if you manage to able to, like, get hit by those specific stuff like this, well, you're probably gonna get yourself screwed over. So even then, I think that pretty much does it for the sake of this video. So join us next weekend of the Forms of Super Mario Party Let's Play. Is the fact that we are heading off to World 3 and 4 in Master Challenge Road. So even then, I'll see you guys in the next weekend. Later, fellas.